Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and anyone anywhere above or in between. This is Virginia, and welcome back to my channel. I'm super happy to be presenting yet another historic build for you today, and I hope you enjoy it. This build is something I was very excited about doing. This is the home that belonged to the one and only Jolkin Rolkin Tolkien. Just kidding. That's not his actual name. It was John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. But memes are funny. Anyway, this is Tolkien's Oxford house, the place where he wrote The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. It took him about a decade to complete Lord of the Rings, and in this not-so-little classic English cottage, it's where it all went down. So it's located on an unassuming residential street in Oxford, and thousands of people flock to this building to see his home. And now that there's a movie coming out, I bet more and more people will go to visit. So this build was an easy decision for me because I'm low-key, high-key, falsetto level key obsessed with Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. It is one of the reasons that my boyfriend of the past decade and I got together because we were both comically obsessed, maybe to an unhealthy level. And my mother is also comically obsessed. She's a big Tolkien fan, so as soon as I learned how to read, it was basically, congratulations, you did it, now read The Hobbit. So, Lord of the Rings and the entire world of Middle-earth has been a part of my life since I can basically remember. So building this house was kind of a no-brainer for me. So really quick, before we get into any information about the man himself, or about any of the stories of Lord of the Rings, or anything like that, let's just go ahead and touch on this build a little. As I said in the beginning, this is a classic kind of Oxford-style large cottage. This is a family home. Tolkien did have 4 children. He was married and had 4 children, so they needed room for their big family. And it's very classic English. You'll see when I start decorating the inside, you can kind of smell the leather wingback chairs, maybe some tobacco smoke. You can smell the tweed, which is an aesthetic that I'm actually a big fan of. And I realized when I was building this that I don't know how long it will take for me to record a build where I just am making a house of, my own volition, not doing a recreation. If I ever decide to do just a regular house that I build, you'll actually be able to see my personal aesthetic. But until that point, you're just seeing me recreate the aesthetics of different time periods and different people. But I would say, of the videos I've uploaded so far, this is probably the closest. Because I love this kind of scholarly, I don't know, maybe I'm secretly like a British grandpa in like my soul. I don't even think it's secret. I think it's pretty apparent to anyone who knows me that I am, in fact, a British old man. But anyway, so something I wanted to note about this really quickly is that, of course, I will be uploading this onto the gallery, so you can download it and play in it as Tolkien or Frodo or whoever you choose. I don't know, maybe Sauron, if you want to go for that dark play. But the one that I upload onto the gallery will actually be a little different. So the one that you actually saw in the clips in the beginning and the ones in the screenshots in the end is a little bit different. And the reason for that is because #drama. Drama between me and my computer. So this was actually one of the easiest builds for me to actually do. Because again, I like this aesthetic, I love Tolkien, it just kind of came out of me, like I was about to talk about bodily fluids, but I'm not gonna do that. I have censored myself. Anyway, it came out very easily, but this has been, without a doubt, the hardest build as far as technical difficulties go. So I don't know if any of you record videos, but I use OBS as my actual display capture. And I decided in my wisdom to switch from recording into MKV or FLV into MP4, which basically all that means is that I wanted to skip a step and just record into an editable video. Well, little did I know that those are easily corrupted, so my first recording in its entirety got corrupted. So I was unable to salvage any of it. So unfortunately I had to do this build again, and it turns out similar but not exactly the same. And I really liked my first go better. They're just little things, like the kitchen's a little bit different, the upstairs is a little bit different, but the basic layout remains the same. So I was fine with recording this video and uploading one that's a little bit different, so I hope that you'll forgive me of that. Also, my editing software, which I use DaVinci Resolve, which is basically like a free version of Adobe Premiere, and it's great, and I've never really had a problem with it, but it definitely froze up at one point, so I lost a lot of my editing too. So it has been some drama on my end to get this video out. Anyway, let's talk about the build here. So you'll see there are little rectangles all throughout this floor plan, and that is because that's where the fireplaces are going. So I kind of cut it out because I had to, of course, trim down this video because these always take me so long. But what I do is, I kind of base it on where the chimneys are on the top. So I took the chimney placement on the roof from actual images of Tolkien's house, and then I tried to place the fireplaces on the inside matching those chimneys. So that's what those rectangles are, and when I actually go in and put the chimneys, I delete those rectangles, so those don't actually stay there, except the one in the kitchen, I believe. But anyway, that's what those are all doing there. I don't take up all of that space. You'll see me doing it here. So I delete them out, put that, and then there you go. You know they're in the right place, or at least basically the right place. So this is decorated in a very 1930s English style. So it's got a lot of wood, a lot of, wallpaper was a really big thing back then. So, it's all very soft. This is a very period-centric house, meaning that it is in the 1930s, and that means there's no real technology in here. There's no television, there's no computer, which of course, if you did want to use this house for your writer, if you have a sim that's a writer, you would have to add computers in, because I just put the kind of prop style little journals and notebooks throughout the house because, that's how Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings. Maybe on a typewriter at some point, but he definitely did not use a computer because it was written, before computers were even thought of. Anyway, so while I'm finishing up some of the landscaping and things here, I just really briefly want to go ahead and start talking about Tolkien. So Tolkien was born, as I said in the beginning, not Rolkin, but John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. And he was born on January 3rd, 1892, and he was actually born in South Africa to a man named Arthur Tolkien, and his mother was Mabel Suffield. Arthur and Mabel had moved to South Africa for Arthur's work, so Tolkien and his younger brother Hilary Arthur were born in South Africa. But his mother and his brother actually left for England when he was about 3, and sadly his father actually died before he could join his family in England. So Mabel and her 2 sons headed to her parents' house in Birmingham, and that's a location where they lived at that time, is a location that's said to have inspired a lot of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, particularly when concerning hobbits. But sadly, in 1904, when Tolkien was only 12 years old, his mother succumbed to diabetes, diabetes was a disease that was a likely death sentence in those days because they didn't have insulin or anything like that to manage the disease well. So his mother had converted to Catholicism before she died, and she left her children in the care of a man named Francis Xavier Morgan. And he was a good Catholic man. So Tolkien and his brother moved once again to stay in, I think it was Edgbaston, Birmingham, where they would attend King Edward's School. And this was around the time that Tolkien starts to discover his love of language and poetry and books and literature. And he begins with some cousins and some friends to create languages of his own, which is it becomes his MO. That's why, Lord of the Rings and all of that mythology is so rich and vibrant, is, he had every detail down, including the languages that his different, creations spoke. So Tolkien began studying at Exeter College in Oxford, where he studied classics, but eventually switched to language and literature. And it was during this time that Tolkien met a young Miss Edith Mary Bratt. She was 3 years older than him and very, very, very charming. And Tolkien fell head over heels in love with her. And it is quoted in some of the literature about him and her that in 1909 they decided that they were in love. But it was a star-crossed kind of love because Edith was a Protestant and Tolkien was a good Catholic boy. So, under the threat of losing his backing towards his education, his guardian, Mr. Morgan, I forget what he called him. It wasn't Friar Morgan. It was something like that. Anyway, his guardians said that he would not pay for his education any longer unless he stopped courting Edith. So, until his 21st birthday. So, upon his 21st birthday, he was kind of free to do whatever he wanted. But Morgan was afraid of Tolkien kind of losing sight of what was important. And also, he wanted him to find a nice Catholic girl. But, wouldn't you know it, on the very evening of Tolkien's 21st birthday, he wrote Edith, saying he had never stopped loving her. But Edith had sadly gotten engaged to another man at that point, because again, she was 3 years older, and in that time, you got married pretty young. And, but she was like, I thought you had forgotten about me. I thought that this was no longer a thing, you know? But Tolkien was like, nah, babe, you're the one. So he took a train on January 8th, 1913, and Edith met him on the platform saying she had returned the ring to her previous fiancé, and later that day accepted Tolkien's proposal of marriage, and they were married on March 22nd of 1916. So it's really adorable. Tolkien's story with his wife is very, very sweet, and he loved her so much, and like it makes me teary-eyed when I think about it, because it's just so sweet. And I'll get into that a little more later, but let's just talk about the build a little. So this kitchen, I tried to do it in a very kind of 1920s, 1930s English fashion. The kitchens weren't as streamlined as they are now. You know, they were sectional. So you had your wash section, your food storage section, your cooking section. So I tried to do that in here. And again, in the downloadable version of this house, it's going to be a little bit different. The fireplace is actually in the middle of the room in that build, as opposed to off to one side. But, I mean, it's pretty much the same. You know, you've still got your sink on one side, your stove on a different place. But I thought it was pretty cool. And I really do like this aesthetic. It's very busy, but, like, there's something really rustic while still remaining classy about this kind of look. Again, just a British old man. That's all it is. So, anyway, back to Tolkien. It was around the time, shortly after Tolkien and Edith got married, that England entered World War I. So, well, they entered World War I in 1914, but Tolkien opted not to enlist immediately, to great scandal, by the way, in order to finish his degree. So after he did earn his degree, Tolkien was enlisted into the British Army and entered the war. I'm not going to talk about his war experiences too much, but I did want to note that he did endure the Battle of the Somme, which was the largest battle of the Western Front of World War I. And it's said that 3 million men took part in this battle, and an estimated million died. So it's one of the bloodiest battles in human history. And, you know, you can kind of see... Of course, you know, Tolkien said, you know, he never said that there was direct allusion to his time in the military in Lord of the Rings, but like, honey child, like, we can see it. You know, the whole idea of a fellowship, of brotherhood, of the evils of war and battle, and PTSD, and the things that, you know, people endure after, you know, witnessing horrors. You know, these are things that writers cannot fully kind of keep from their writing when, you know, they're such prominent parts of their life. And I'm saying this as a fellow writer, so I think even if we don't mean to, we put parts of ourselves into our stories. And I think the time that he spent in the trenches during World War I, during that awful battle, definitely made their way into Lord of the Rings. And he lost a lot of his friends during that battle. A lot of the friends that he made when he was a child that, he made little clubs with, and they studied literature and poetry together. Pretty much all of them died, specifically in that battle, because the battle actually lasted for a very long time. It lasted from, I think it was July to November of 1916, but Tolkien actually came down with trench fever, which caused him to return to England in November, so he didn't actually stay until the end of the battle. But again, most of his friends died there. So during Tolkien's convalescence back in England, he began work on the Book of Lost Tales. And this is a work that was meant to be a mythology for England. So it's kind of the beginning of Middle-earth and Lord of the Rings. It's kind of the backbone of it. And it was during this time that Edith gave birth to their first child, John Francis. And Tolkien left the army in 1920 and began his civilian life. And he began working on the Oxford English Dictionary, which to me was kind of funny because, of course, somebody writes the dictionary. The dictionary doesn't just exist, but you never really think about the people that do write the dictionary. And Tolkien was one of them. So he helped. According to sources, he focused on the history and etymology of the words with Germanic origin, starting with the letter W. Can you imagine trying to describe to somebody what your job is? Well, you see, I'm working on the dictionary, specifically words of Germanic origin starting with the letter W. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I would talk to that person at a party. I don't know if everyone else would, but I think that they would be cool. Anyway, so he then, after working on the dictionary, began his academic career, which he is most known for. And it eventually led him to a teaching position as professor of Anglo-Saxon at Pembroke College in Oxford. So it was during this time, while he was at Pembroke, while living at 20 Northmoor Road in North Oxford, i.e. this house that I'm building right now, that Tolkien wrote The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So, as you can see in the build, I'm working on his little study here, which to me was one of the most important parts of this build, kind of imagining where he wrote it, and, what his surroundings must have been like. And in this build, I wanted to make sure that I kept some notes of, kids. I wanted there to be elements of children in this house, lots of clutter, very, very academic. Academic people, they have cluttered minds. They say the more cluttery your desk is, the smarter you are. Or at least that's the lie I constantly tell myself. But yeah, so there are notes of children, so I try and, have some games, and you see I have some paintings and stuff on the wall, because Tolkien was a family man, and he wrote The Hobbit originally as a tale for his children. Yeah, he loved his kids. He loved his family very dearly. So yeah, when The Hobbit was written, he wrote it for his children, but somehow, I can't 100% remember how, but it made its way into the hands of a woman named Susan Dagnall, who was an employee at George Allen and Unwin Publishing House. Unwin, whatever. She came across the manuscript and insisted that Tolkien publish it. She was like, girl, you got yourself gold right here. And, so Tolkien was like, alright, let's make this happen. He was already an academic. He already had his chosen profession, but, why not? So he did, and it was a surprisingly large success. It was so good that the publishing house was like, okay, write more. We want more about Middle-earth. And so Tolkien spent 10 years working on Lord of the Rings and its appendices. So the Burks. Oh my god, Burks! Do you guys remember that meme from, I don't know, that was 5-6 years ago? Doesn't matter. Anyway, the books were, as we all know, huge successes. And Lord of the Rings is still one of the best-selling novels of the 20th century. Super iconic. Way to go, Tolkien. But anyway, so that's basically Tolkien's life. Edith, his wife, died on November 29th of 1971 at the age of 82. Her and Tolkien had 4 children: John Francis, Michael Hilary, Christopher John, and Priscilla Ann. And Tolkien had the word Luthien inscribed on his wife's grave. And 21 months later, on September 2nd, 1973, Tolkien himself died. And upon his grave was written the word Beren. Beren was the son of Barhir, Lord of Dorthonion. After many terrible battles and the loss of his father and kingdom, Beren fled to the elvish realm of Doriath, where he met Luthien, the only daughter of the king Thingol and Queen Melian, as she was dancing and singing in the glade. Upon seeing her, Beren fell in love, for she was the fairest of all the elves. Moved by her beauty and enchanting voice, he gave her the nickname Tinuviel, the daughter of twilight. And when Beren called to her to Nuviel, Luthien came to Beren and returned his love. But when they were finally discovered in the forest, Luthien brought her love before her father the king. But the king regarded Beren as unworthy of his daughter, and thus told him in order to marry Luthien, he must complete the seemingly impossible task of retrieving one of the Silmarils, the 3 jewels made by Feanor, which the Dark Lord Morgoth had stolen from the elves. Beren left in search of his treasure, and Luthien soon followed. There were many battles fought and lost, and Beren found himself a prisoner. But Luthien, aided by Huan the Hound, freed Beren. They took up the task together this time. They made their way inside Angband, and there, at the throne of Morgoth himself, Luthien sang a magic song and put the Dark Lord into a deep sleep. But as he cut the Silmarils from Morgoth's crown, Beren accidentally awakened the monster. Though they were able to escape, Beren lost his hand to the werewolf Carcharoth, and with it the Silmaril that King Thingol had sent him to retrieve. But having heard their tale, the king took pity on the lovers and allowed them to be married. But Carcharoth the werewolf had entered the land of Doriath and was terrorizing the land. Beren and Huan set out to stop the creature. Sadly, they both were mortally wounded. Before he died, Beren returned to the king and handed him the Silmaril that he had retrieved from the corpse of Carcharoth, who had swallowed it. In her grief, Luthien died, and came to the halls of Mandos, the keeper of the souls of elves. There she sang a song of her and her lost love, and Mandos, moved by her tale of woe, restored the pair to life. And Luthien was granted mortality, and her and Beren lived the rest of their lives together, and eventually died the most welcome of deaths, the death from old age. And scene. So that was my brief retelling of the story of Beren and Luthien. I highly suggest you pick up a copy of the Silmarillion, or just Beren and Luthien, which is now on sale. Anyway, that was meant to kind of show you Tolkien's storytelling, and to show you how much Edith meant to him. Because again, Luthien was inscribed on her gravestone, and Beren was inscribed on his. So that was the tale of his love for his wife. And you know, they were a little bit of star-crossed lovers, so it's a beautiful story. Based in actual events of Tolkien's life. So whether or not you're a fan of his writing, whether or not you're a big Lord of the Rings fan, he was an incredible individual and a very passionate man. And I wish beyond all wishing that I could have sat down and just, had a conversation with the man. So, we are actually, now that I've talked about Tolkien for forever, coming up on the end of the build here. Again, like with a lot of my other builds, because they are historic, I go in and I do remove a lot of the overhead lights, or replace the overhead lights with more period-appropriate ones. So if you do download this, which is on the gallery, ItsLoolyLoo is my name on the gallery, just like my channel name. But if you do this, you may want to go in and put in some brighter lights, and again, might want to put in some computers, maybe a TV, get yourself a boombox or something. Give your Sims something to do. Because I definitely have had Sims in this house. You see me pull up the dog fountain. I was like, ooh, what's this? Oh, it's a gigantic dog fountain. I forgot. Anyway, so I have had Sims playing in this. And yeah, there's just not a lot to do. In the one that I upload into the gallery, I have one of those like kids play tables from Parenthood, and that's all the Sims do. They immediately beeline to that play table. And adults, children, doesn't matter. The play table is where it's at in this build. So I hope that, as always, you enjoyed a little history lesson about Jolkin, Rolkin, Tolkien. I hope that you enjoy the build. It's very playable. You know, it's very classic. It's very British. If you want to talk in a British accent for the entire time that you play with your Sims in this, I highly suggest it. It makes you feel a little more at home. And again, you will see the screenshots here in just a moment, and they will be just a little bit different than what you see me making now, because they were different builds, and my computer hates me, and I have whatever the opposite of Luck of the Irish is, I have that. So, if you want to, like, tell me what you think the opposite of Luck of the Irish is. I did have somebody tell me that they thought it was Luck of the Native Americans, which my mom is Cherokee. And when I say Cherokee, I don't mean like my great-great-great-great-grandmother was an Indian princess. Like, my mom was born on the reservation in North Carolina. Like, I could say I have Luck of the Native Americans without offending too many people. But anyway, maybe there's a less offensive one someone can tell me. I don't think it's offensive as somebody of Native background. But anyway, now that I've gotten randomly almost not PC, I hope you enjoyed this build. And yeah, I look forward to next time. Like and subscribe. And any comments or suggestions you have for other videos, let me know. Love you. Bye.